Woohoo! My wife put my name on my OMNI CNC t-shirt. Moving up in the world. I got something a little different to show today. A friend of mine does countertops, and he does them with a hard resin, and they're really quite beautiful. So I had made a textured piece of MDF that was 2 foot by 4 foot, and I used one of the texturing modes from Vectric Aspire. And after I got done with that, sanded it down, cut some edges off for the boundaries, and we took it over to his shop. And unfortunately, I didn't videotape the stuff in the shop, and you've already seen the texturing video previously, so this is no different than that. But what you are going to see is an idea for yourself to try if you want to do something a little bit different with your woodwork. Now, the motivation from this came from a trend right now that we're seeing called resin-based rivers on material, and I'll show you a little bit of what that looks like, and then you can see a little bit of how the textures are created. You don't have to have Aspire or even VCarve Pro to create these textures. You can create them manually, and I'll show you how to do that also. And hopefully you'll learn something new and get to try something different. This stuff is selling for quite a bit. It's very popular here in the United States. I think it's also pretty popular in Europe and portions of Japan. So maybe you'll find a customer out there that will make your day. In any event, until that time, have a good one. So now we're going to start with the actual texture itself. So what we're going to do first is show you the very simple way to create a texture. And for those of you who are familiar with any of the more popular tools, Aspire, VCarve Pro, I think Bobcat, some of the others have this functionality built into them. But it's actually very simple to do. So if you come up here and you look on the left, and you see that there is a little button there, and it says texture on it. Maybe not. In any event, create texture vector. So as you go through here, it's just a matter of filling out the values to see what you get in the way of the texture. Now the texture is going to be by definition a little bit erratic, okay? And that's intended to give it that sort of wild look to your artwork here, if you want to call it that. So let's see max spacing. Let's call that I'm doing imperial here, so let's do max spacing is 0.25 inches. Okay. Now this is the amplitude. That's going to be from the top to the bottom of the wave. So let's go ahead and do let's do 1.5 inches. I'm not sure how this is all going to work out, but that wavelength is way too long here, so we're going to bring that wavelength down to about 3.5 inches. And the wavelength, if the amplitude is the distance from the top of the crust to the bottom of the crust, then the wavelength is the distance from the beginning of the crust to the end of the crust. Now you can add noise here, and as you turn the noise up, it will make the lines more erratic. If you turn it all the way down, then the noise will become less to the point of being just about zero. So to give you an example of this, I'm going to go ahead and turn the noise up. You can see that this places the vectors on a layer that's created for you within Aspire called outer vectors. And let's just go ahead and see what we get whenever we get a preview. And that's sort of what it looks like. Okay, so it's sort of wavy. It's interesting, but not too erratic. So let's see what happens if we crank up the noise here. Let's turn the noise all the way up to the top and see what we get. And we see we get a little bit more distance in certain spots, greater distance in between the crusts. And then if you look down in here, you're seeing a lot of erratic behavior moving back and forth between the lines. Now I bring that erratic behavior up because if you decide that you want to do something like this, you need to remember that just because you're running lines across the length of the material, the erratic behavior is going to cause a lot of back and forth movement in the CNC. So what that's going to wind up doing is turning the duration of the cut up considerably. Okay? So that's pretty much how you do that. Let's go ahead and adjust the amplitude a little bit, and we'll show how that one affects. And bring that back down. Okay, so let's see what that happens. And now you can see as we bring the amplitude up, we get great distances between the top of the crest and the bottom of the trough. Okay, so let's cancel that out of that, and now let's go over to, this is a tool that I believe may be in Vectric VCarve Pro. I'm unsure about that, but I'm using it here in Aspire because that's what I have. And so we come through here, and basically, once again, we're in the business of just filling out basically a form to how we want this to show. So let's say we got a max cut depth of 0.175 inches. The start depth is going to be 1/10 of an inch. The max cut length is going to be 5 inches. The max overlap is going to be 20%, and what that means is that a line will never cross more than about 20% of another line. The step over is 0.2 inches, and the angle is 30 degrees. And what that 30-degree angle means is that the line from here to here is going to have a 30-degree angle on it. So this is not radically different than what we just filled out before, but it allows you to do one other thing, and that is you can go up here, and if you've already created a bunch of vectors, you can use the selected vectors as the pattern and then adjust the depth. So that's kind of handy. Let's see what happens whenever we create these. And you can see it's not so radical or erratic as the other pattern was, but it is kind of interesting. So let's see what happens if we preview the toolpath. But first, let's pick a bit. Now, this is just a 1/4 inch bit, and I'm going to tell you there are loads of videos out there by Vectric that will tell you how to use all of this, and they'll tell you a lot better than the way I'm describing it. What we're going to add here today is the addition of the resin, which will give you a much different appearance to these textured panels. So let's see what happens whenever we preview the toolpath. Okay. Did I not select it? So let's preview selected toolpath. Okay. And believe me, this is much faster than it's actually going to go. Okay. So whenever you look at that, that's kind of interesting. You know, if you like something like that, I'm not too much into it, but you may have a customer who is. So it's nice to know that you can do this. All right. So now let's go ahead and we're going to delete that. Delete this, close, and let's reset our preview. Okay. So now let's just go in and let's create a bunch of vectors. Okay, so this is an arc vector, and I don't know exactly how this is all going to work out, but we'll find out as we go along. And now I'm going to turn it down a little bit, and then I'm going to turn it up a little bit, and turn it down a little bit. Okay, so we're getting, you know, just sort of a randomized pattern here. And, you know, this is not rocket science. Many of you may have thought about this already. Okay, so I'm going to get a little lazy here and stretch that one out. And one last arc. Okay, so there we are. So now what we need to do is join those arcs. So let's just go ahead and select them all. We press J on the keyboard and join, and boom, there we go. All right, so now I'm going to do something a little bit radical, and I'm going to rotate this thing about 30 degrees. Okay, now I'm going to move it down here, And I could just do copy paste, but VCarve Pro and Vectric Aspire provide the ability to create a linear array of copies. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll do the Y offset at 0.125 inches. We'll do the X offset as 0, and we're going to say that we want 25. Let's just see what happens. Okay, so we go copy. Oops, a little bit too much. So we'll do Control Z. That'll undo that. And the Y offset. Oh, I put a gap in there. Let's do the offset. Now let's see what happens. Okay, so there we go. All right. So we've got a rather, an interesting texture. So now we can just Control C, Control V this, and move it up, and just keep doing that. Okay, now I'm not going to make a creation of art here. I'm just giving an example of how to do this on your machine. And then I'll show you what I did yesterday on my Omni machine. Okay, so now let's go ahead and select all those, and we'll group them by pressing G. Okay, and now let's move it to the center of our material. Okay, there it is. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a tool path for that. Now this may not be what you were expecting. You may have wanted an entire panel that was texturized, but we're going to get to that in just a second. Okay, so let's just create a tool path. We'll go ahead and create a profile tool path, and our depth is going to be 1/10 of an inch. Okay, and then we're going to select, I like V bits, so let's go ahead and select a V bit, and we're just going to pick a 60-degree one. We're going to apply that, make sure our settings are all set up. It says it's going to be 2 passes. I want that to be on the line, okay, and I don't care if it does a separate pass or not for this demo. So let's go ahead and calculate that, and let's take a look at what we get. Okay. So we go preview all tool paths, and you can see that it's kind of an interesting texture. It's got a regular spacing there, which you may not wish, but we're going to take care of that with our next step. Okay. Now keep in mind we were able to do this completely without any special tools in Aspire or any other tool. We could do this. So now let's select that. And I'm going to go over here to the flip option, and I'm just going to flip this. I'm just going to do top, okay? And so that moves it up here. And now I'm going to move that down to there, okay? Now we get an interesting looking little appearance there. So now we've got a different set of textures, and we're going to go ahead and create another profile, and now we're going to do this a little bit different. Okay, we're going to go 0.75 of an inch. So this way we're going to go slightly shallower depth. Now we could do this all day long by creating different vectors and setting the depths different, and you know, it's just more labor intensive than it is to use the tool that's provided with most of the CAD/CAM programs. So we go ahead and calculate that, and you know, normally I would trim all these vectors off the edge, but that's not really necessary for just the demonstration purpose. So let's preview all the tool paths, and you can see that we've got a rather interesting erratic pattern there. Okay, so now how might this be of use to us? Okay. Well, first of all, if we wanted to trim around all the edges, we'd get some very interesting kind of artistic appearance there. I am an engineer by trade, so I'm not sure that I'm the best person to judge art, but I'm going to use another artist to show how the approach I used to solve the next problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop this now, and I'll come back here in just a minute whenever I got the next thing set up. Okay, so this is the pattern that I decided to go with. It's 24 inches wide by 48 inches long. For those of you who use metric, I'm sorry, I did have to study metric whenever I was a kid growing up, but the United States is resistant to coming along with the rest of the world, so that's the way it goes. So let's go ahead and look and see what it looks like whenever we run the toolpath cut on it. And we are just going to select the texture pattern. And as you can see, I ran the pattern out the side because I wanted it to have smooth in and out approaches to the material. Okay, so let me go ahead and preview that. Preview the selected toolpath. And that's kind of how it works out. Now what you might notice with this one is because I have the noise and the overlap set to be a fairly high value, that I'm getting lines crossing back and forth. Okay. Now I have to tell you to be very careful if you decide you're going to do this with MDF, because my first setting was at 1/4 of an inch, and I think that works to be a little bit over 6 millimeters. Now because of that, the MDF was just gouged. It had nothing to do with the router bit or the speed or anything. It's just that I was cutting too much out and it wasn't going to look good, so I stopped it pretty quickly. Okay, so keep an eye on this. Let's remember this, and we'll go from there to looking at the picture of the finished product. So what my friend Carlos and I did was take a resin that was clear by nature and mixed a whole bunch of different colors up into it. Now for those of you who are familiar with tie-dyed clothing, that was sort of the approach we took. Neither one of us are really artists, so we just sort of threw it down in there and mixed it all up to see how it turned out. Now if you don't like dark tan colors, then you might not like this. But if you do and you think they fit in, then you're going to love this. So what was really pleasantly surprising was that we used colors like black, orange, purple, yellow, green, and others. And what we noticed was that the coloration all seemed to settle in the grooves, which was really cool, because if we wanted to, it meant we didn't have to spend hours putting the coloration into the groove in order to achieve the effect which we were pretty much shooting for, which is a little bit of wildness in the surface color, and then the majority of the color to be in the lines. Okay, now I got to tell you, I'm going to show you what Jackson Pollock looks like, and you're going to say that doesn't look anything like what Jackson Pollock did. But we strove for what Jackson Pollock did. He was a very famous artist, and you know, we failed. But hey, I still like it. You tell me what you think. Okay, so this is what Jackson Pollock's art used to look like, or still looks like, I guess I should say. Whenever I took an art history class at Arizona State University, the art instructor referred to Jackson Pollock and everybody that painted like him as the drip and drool school of art. A lot of artists really didn't feel like it was art. It was just somebody, like a child, messing around with it. Now, I don't think that's the case, because I think in particularly, if you get a nice wall that's kind of clear, maybe a light tan or something, and you put this up on there, it's really going to be very unique. And you can see that, of course, one thing whenever you paint this way is that you can create a lot of paintings very quickly. Okay, so in any event, this is a Pollock split screen, and once again he just did black on one side and white on the other, and then did the reverse in the form of the dripping and drooling. So, you know, the idea behind this, I guess, is that, oops, somebody's texting me, I apologize for that. The idea behind this is that you could very easily take this picture, import it, use the bitmap trace tool, and then go from there to see how everything turns out. You'd have settled shallow pockets that you could put the colors in, and it might turn out better than what we did, but nonetheless I still like it, with these colorations dropping into the spots where you've made shallow pockets, like right here. So then you might be able to do this with a little bit of texturing, wouldn't take too long to do, and then add the resin on top of it, And then whenever you go to, let's go to resin table top. And I don't know what's going to show up, so this is going to be, ooh, I do like that. $500 showing up for a fairly simple piece of work. So we come in here, and let's go back. I like that other one, I think, a little bit better than this one. Let's go to this one. This is a 4x8 table. You can see it's $500. There's a lot of wood in here, but one of the things that you should notice about this is that the underside is not actually the wood in general in these that you're using to make the resin table. And the reason behind that is that you need to be able to pour the resin in and not have it flow through. So sometimes you got to build a table to make these. And my friend Carlos and I are talking about doing that. So you can see, you get a little closer, man, that has a very nice finish to it. And that's the one nice thing about resin, is that you can really take a rough piece of wood and turn it into a very fine surface. Okay? So all of this stuff here is coming from what's called live edge wood. But you don't have to have live edge wood if you wanted to use MDF. Paint the MDF and then perhaps use your CNC to carve the spots out and then pour in there. So then you'll have a coloration. You can see this coloration, or this striping right here, is very similar to the striping over here. And we could just have adjusted that and made it a little bit shallower, or give it some more variation in the depth, and then come over here and added the colorations that we wanted here. So now what you basically get is twice the wood for the same price. Okay, now you do have to buy the resin, but generally my experience is that when you're looking for live edge wood, it tends to be very expensive. So now you're able to make a big conference table, and you add the legs, and boom, $500. Not bad for somebody who is artistically challenged. Okay, so in any event, that's pretty much it for a day. Don't forget to send a thank you in to Alan Zhang for giving me the opportunity to make these videos for OMNI CNC. I sure appreciate that. And Amanda Chung, because she's the one who writes the checks for this. So they're all good people, and I have been very happy with my CNC. It's a great CNC, and I hope you're happy with yours. If you got any questions, either about the art or maybe something smaller about your CNC, I'll try and answer them, but I think contacting Alan for any kind of technical work would be the way to go, and contact me if you want to learn how to make certain kinds of art. Until that point in time, you guys have a great one, and we'll chat later.